Thank you, Alan, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. As I left New York this morning, you could see the motorcades of foreign diplomats beginning to descend on the city. They began to arrive earlier this week for the United Nations General Assembly. And soon enough, far too soon for most of us, one of those motorcades will be the one conveying Mahmoud Ahmadinejad into the heart of a city of people of diverse background and creative energy, a diversity and an energy that he despises to his core. Where's the hope? Well, can we find it in the Arab, what has been described as the Arab Spring and the forces sweeping the Middle East? Well, the sad fact is that that movement has begun to succeed only in authoritarian countries, not in totalitarian countries. In other words, it's begun to succeed only in countries where there is some limit to the brutality that the regime is able and willing to bring to bear on dissent. But in countries where there is no limit to the brutality that the regime would use to put down dissent, and Iran tops the list of those countries, the story has not been as happy. Back in February, when Egyptians were first beginning to stir, at Friday prayers in Tehran, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, speaking not in Farsi, but in Arabic, to make sure he reached and impressed people in Cairo, he claimed that events in Tahrir Square were the natural extension of the 1979 revolution in Iran. He was obviously not embarrassed that in 2009 he himself had given the orders to put down the uprising in the streets of Tehran that actually began the Arab Spring. And then again, that the regime has responded with brute force. Even before Iranians went into the street, the mullahs executed people in record numbers and called for the execution of anyone who dissents. And when people were nonetheless brave enough to take to the streets again, the regime cut the ties between the protesters and the outside world so that it could use brutality without being seen. And in particular, as I'm sure many of you in this room know better than I, the mullahs have executed people with a connection to Camp Ashraf, where MEK residents are holding out, despite the efforts of Iran and its collaborators among the Iraqi authorities to drive the residents back to Iran or to destroy them altogether. I've been before you on earlier occasions, and that we have heard many people anxiously long for and look for signs that this country, the United States, so despised by Ahmadinejad and the mullahs in Tehran, would bestir itself and take concrete action to do what Ahmadinejad and those who pull his strings most oppose and fear, and that is to remove the MEK from the State Department's list of foreign terrorist organizations. Those hopes so far have not been realized, and it seems ironic to have to report this morning, as Alan Gerson did, that the main hope for the people of Ashraf as we sit here is that the United Nations, an organization that has not exactly covered itself with glory over the years, will act through the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, at least to help the residents of Ashraf get the benefit of a guarantee that was given to them by a United States general in 2003, that they would have the status of protected persons under the Fourth Geneva Convention. The history here is known to many, but nonetheless bears repeating. In the 1990s, as a goodwill gesture to the regime in Tehran, our government placed the MEK on that list. By all accounts, this was done to help us engage with the regime, and perhaps to get the regime to behave as a responsible member of the world community. Whether that policy was wise or foolish, there's no mistaking that it failed. Repeatedly, the Iranian regime has grown only more hostile and more threatening toward the United States and toward its neighbors. In the administration in which I served, that designation was continued, this time out of fear that if the MEK were delisted, the Iranians would provide weapons, including deadly IEDs, to insurgents in Iraq. Well, that policy, too, was a failure because, as we know, although the designation continued, Iran has supplied deadly weapons, including IEDs, to those insurgents. Where do we stand today? Well, in Camp Ashraf, the organization that surrendered its arms and placed itself under the international protection in 2003 to the point where the residents of Ashraf each received an identification card issued by the United States designating that person as a protected person. That camp has been attacked twice by Iraqi troops. Once in July of 2009 and once in April of 2011, and both times when the Secretary of Defense